Coming up on Over a Barrel. I don't understand the logic. It makes no sense. And normally, I'm the guy who's like, okay, Patrick, calm down. Don't take an opinion. But now I'm getting riled up. Over a Barrel starts right now. Welcome to Over a Barrel. I'm Matt McLean. He's Patrick DeHaan. And boy, do we have a show for you. Make sure that you like and subscribe and, do all the normal things that you would do if you happen to really want to listen to this episode and all the future episodes as they come out right away. Well, hi. How are you, Patrick?
Good morning. Hey. Afternoon or evening, depending on where you are.
It's like the old Truman thing. Good morning. And in case I don't see you again, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
There you go.
I think that's how it goes anyway. Sometimes I feel like I live in the Truman Show these days. How are you doing, sir? I mean, is everything going well for you?
Everything's going well, Matt. I can't wait to get into this episode. This is a question that has been all over the media. We're kind of hiding it. But I think a lot of folks have probably read about this because I would say the number of people asking what is going to happen, it's been really thought-provoking. So maybe we should just jump right into it.
I have no problem doing that whatsoever. Look at that headline. And it's from, the Wall Street Journal. It's not some sidelined whatever that nobody's ever heard of kind of a situation. Most people are familiar with the Wall Street Journal, just a few. What kind of headline is that?
Well, and look at it, by the way, this is just all over the news. If you look at this, the IEA's prediction by 2030 that we're going to be awash in crude oil. Look at all this coverage.
What is going on with all of that? Like, I mean, is there truth to this? Is this I'm not going to lie. Patrick,
I think a lot of people get really excited when they see this, right?
That may get me to my 99 cent a gallon hope and dream and all of that.
Well, I mean, I get too far ahead of.
Come on, let me dream for at least 30 seconds. You are such a dream stealer. What is going on with this?
I'd like to be a realist, Matt. We have to manage our expectations, and there's a lot of folks that read something like this and look at that. I mean, this sounds really amazing, but I have to say, so. A lot of the consensus in the report here is that we're going to be awash in crude oil by the end of the decade. Now, keep in mind, this really has a lot in it that are baked into, look here, rising electric car sales, fuel efficiency improvements, the use of renewables. I have to highlight, though, a lot of this, keep in mind, especially electric car sales, right? There's a lot of assumptions here made in this forecast. Keep in mind, this is 6 years from now. This is a pretty dramatic, all of a sudden in 6 years, we're going to wake up and see, a lot more crude oil. But keep in mind, this is the first thing they notice here. The first thing they notate is rising electric car sales. And keep in mind, even in the last 6 months or a year, Matt, the pace has really dramatically shifted. Companies like Tesla that 2 years ago, their stock was hitting record highs are now seeing some of the record lows. We've talked about this on the program that EV sales have been struggling. Looking at your headline there.
Exactly.
Sells Tesla's fleet. I mean, the pace of change in the last 6 months has been completely unexpected, right? A lot of the big three manufacturers have been caught flat-footed here by the sudden shift back towards hybrid vehicles, towards vehicles that Americans are aware of. And keep in mind, there's an election coming up in less than 6 months, and politicians, specifically the White House, can either push Americans towards more EVs or potentially, if the Trump administration, if Trump wins a second term, the opposite could be true here with a move away. Now, keep in mind, Trump in recent days has been getting more cozy as I speak about it. You just look up this headline of Trump and Elon Musk, right? Because Elon Musk has been having personal phone calls with Trump. So could that be a needle mover? A lot of assumptions here, Matt, are that, that this could change drastically based on EV sales. But even if this happened, Matt, even if the world becomes awash in crude oil, I would point out that just because there's a lot of crude oil doesn't necessarily translate to your 99-cent gasoline prices, you
Oh,
know.
come on, man.
Well, keep in mind in Illinois, this is a ripe topic. Why doesn't cheap oil necessarily beget cheap gasoline? Is because states like Illinois are continuing to raise gas taxes. And keep in mind here, July 1st, Illinois is raising the gas tax another 2 cents. So as oil prices remain constant, Matt, if they were to remain constant, rising gasoline taxes are making those prices that you're hoping for less and less possible over time. So keep in mind, cheap oil doesn't always mean cheap gasoline prices. And I hate to throw a little bit of cold water on this. Number one, even if we do get cheap oil, right, it doesn't translate to cheap gasoline because of refineries. And number two, we don't know the pace of the transition to EVs. So there's a lot of wild cards here that would have to happen to make this happen. And keep in mind, Matt, if there was a glut of crude oil, OPEC, do you really think that suddenly we're going to wake up and OPEC's going to be okay with oil prices that are much lower? Do you think U.S. oil producers are going to keep churning out oil if oil prices suddenly plummet?
I mean, so that's the key is I got so many topics there to discuss. We could go on for hours. In fact, we could just call it the over a barrel day at this point. I mean, so here's I'm going to throw out some problems with this and see what your thoughts are on all of this. I don't know that the left hand is knowing what the right hand is doing with all of this when it comes to communicating. And here's why I'm saying that. If you want us to move over to electric vehicles, it's probably not a good idea to substantially raise the price of electric rates. I mean, don't you think that's a logical statement?
Yeah.
So then why is the Environmental Protection Agency doing a mandate for coal-fired power plants to shut them all completely down, where the electric grid, in fact, there's now a lawsuit that's been filed where the electric grid is no longer able to sustain that because of renewable sources, which I'm all for, by the way. Wind, solar, I mean, all of it. Bring it. Hydro. I mean, from where I'm sitting right now, there's two massive hydroelectric production dams just not 20 minutes south of me. And I'm all for it. Clean energy is a fantastic thing. But the regulations are so quickly to come into play, they can't replace the coal-fired plants that they are demanding to be shut down, effectively putting them offline at the same time that the energy and power grid simply can't facilitate what's already there. Now imagine everybody flips over to an electric vehicle and imagine the demand. I don't know how many vehicles are out on the highways in America, like how many vehicles are active on a daily basis, or, you know, how many people own their vehicles. I have no, it's in the millions, understandably, tens of millions. But the fact of the matter is, what if you threw all of that and just removed gasoline fired and gasoline powered engines out? Well, now look at the strain you have suddenly created on the electricity side.
Well,
I know,
and look at this. Look at. I was going to say, look at
it
this.
doesn't make
headline that I
sense.
pulled up, Matt, because here's what's behind some of the slowdown potentially. That the Biden administration realizes that suddenly the EV adoption pace is going to slow. There's been a little bit of backlash. And keep in mind, auto manufacturers have been pushing more of these hybrids that are both electric, right, for a short range in town. But when you get out of town or drive more than 40 miles, it kicks over to gasoline to regenerate battery power. So, this is, it's interesting because, you have a lot of this happening, but it's the $1 million question, Matt. Nobody knows the pace of the EV transition. Will Americans respond? How many more incentives do they need? Are some people always just going to keep their internal combustion engine vehicle?
Not if they don't have gasoline for it. Not if all the gas stations convert over to electric station charging.
That's so oversold. There's a station, the station in gas station in, I think it was New Hampshire, ripped out all its gas pumps and put in EV chargers. And just, a move like that is just drastic. If you want to go bankrupt, rip it out, make a transition, and hope that people will start showing up. But, and this highlights the IEA, they may be drastically wrong on this. Maybe they'll be right. But keep in mind here, demand in developed countries is set to fall from last year to 2030. Do we really think that oil companies are going to let a glut of crude oil suddenly develop?
I mean, yeah. I mean, the fun part is this: we only have so much control as a nation, right? I mean, we can certainly control domestic, I guess, production, to our gain or our peril, I suppose, or keep it balanced in between. But that's the key. I Oh, I have so many comments. Do I dare mention some of them? And by the way, I'm all for, again, clean energy. Got no problem with it. Love it to death. And so this is why on this program, more than once, probably to Patrick's like, oh my gosh, he's about to say it again. Why are we not utilizing reformulated gasoline across the entire country? What difference does it make if the tailpipe is in Montana or downtown Manhattan?
Right.
Cleaner fuel is cleaner fuel. As a culmination of every single vehicle in America, instead of a piecemeal process where certain urban areas have reformulated gasoline, as if somehow the pollution coming out of the tailpipe driving through a national forest doesn't matter. I don't understand the logic. It makes no sense. And normally I'm the guy who's like, okay, Patrick, calm down. Don't take an opinion. But now I'm getting riled up.
Well, Matt, no, you see the map I posted.
I did. Look at that. Go figure.
So, and look at all the different blends required, right? This is just, kind of broad. This is an assumption here. I wouldn't say assumption. Look at the article's a little bit old, but again, this highlights, to your point, the complexity of summer gasoline. Why don't you?
Yeah, it's more complex now because, like, I'm looking at the St. Louis metro area, which is a 2-state metro area. And now it requires on the Illinois side a different reformulated brand or version of gasoline than the Missouri side.
No, it's
Is it the same?
now. Yeah.
Oh, it's the same now. Okay.
You may be looking at an older map, but yeah, I mean, it's still complex though. I mean, you look at Southwest Ohio and then Northern Kentucky. There's 3 different blends there in a very small area. So
it just doesn't make sense. Again, if we are all about clean air, which I am, see my hand? I'm raising it on the screen, right? It doesn't make sense if the tailpipe is in Montana or Manhattan or downtown Los Angeles. Who cares? It's cleaner fuel no matter what. And as a cumulative effect, it's not as if there aren't millions of vehicles outside the reformulated areas in the country. And again, I'm not saying it's a long-term, a long-term situation. You want to eventually move over to electric. That's great. But the average cost of a kilowatt hour in California is roughly about 30.4 cents. Do you know I'm currently paying with hydroelectric 20 minutes south where they can produce the electric for free? I mean,
you can't get rid of it at that point. So
right.
There's a lot
and I'm paying 17.4 cents per kilowatt hour where I used to pay 8, 9. Right. So you're wanting me to convert over to electric, but at the same time, the electric companies are then now forced to charge more because of more and more regulations. And according to the electric companies, which is why the lawsuit has been filed, it is creating instability. Because think about it. Solar power is great till the sun sets, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Wind power is wind is great until you have calm winds in the dead of summer, where is here in the upper South Midwest where you have that kind of a situation where the winds, there's not a sea breeze here. We're too far away from the ocean. So it gets calm when it gets 105 outside. That's when your demand is there. So they're saying it's creating instability. And if you force the closure of all the coal-powered plants and the natural gas plants, by the way, which is what they're wanting to do, then you have a problem because the renewable energies are only there to be able to produce when it can produce. Hydroelectric's about one of the most consistent in all of that. But again, jack the rates up and then say, oh, by the way, now that we've got the rates up to being very expensive, right? Now we're having to look at that and say, now we want you to add a vehicle that's going to cost X amount of dollars per fuel up, charge up. And then you've got a very sincere problem at that point. Who wants to pay? I was talking to a friend just north of Los Angeles. He's paying 50.2 cents per kilowatt hour. Now, and he has an electric vehicle. His electric bill currently is the price of a normal mortgage every month, a mortgage payment. Who wants that?
Well, and this is why the IEA prediction, right? There's a lot of, you're talking about all the fragmentation here, and that's why these predictions are very difficult to make because who knows? 6 years from now, when we're awash or maybe we won't be awash in oil. The EV picture will look a lot different, but they're making a lot of assumptions that obviously the situation is going to change and nobody really has all the answers. And
Yep.
economics is really going to dictate the future of prices, not really the IEA. I feel like has become a little bit more political, so there's that. But this prediction is, it's attention grabbing. Look at all the press they got. Maybe that was the point, but I don't know that that's going to stand the test of time. It's hard enough to forecast gas prices 12 months out
Right.
than making a 6-year prediction.
Well, but if you stop and think about it, it puts people on their soapbox. Look at what I just did the past couple of minutes, right? I mean, stop and think about that. I mean,
Maybe I
it
should
really
make a
grabs your attention.
salacious report that predicts the end of gasoline in 7 years. I bet you that would be pretty far reaching, but I feel like my integrity would get flushed down the toilet in exchange for clicks. But
I feel like my blood pressure is rising right now, just thinking about all of
I
this.
can feel your blood pressure up
It's
through the camera here.
Yeah, and again, I'm normally the mild-mannered reporter that sits behind the microphone and never has an opinion. And suddenly, it just struck me. So here we are. I'll go back to being that mild-mannered individual. And Patrick, tell us what's on your mind today. How are you?
Well, hey, Matt, I'm going to share an article that gives us a little bit of good news here this morning.
Awesome.
Article that came out, thankfully.
Oh my gosh.
Yours truly got a mention in there. But 2 years ago today, the national average hit its record high. And you remember those days? 502. I think we actually went up to 508 according to our
Do I remember those days? I texted you and sent you pictures every single day. Of course I remember. They're branded into my brain.
Harassed by you asking when it was going to go down to 99 cents. But
and
we, thankfully, Matt, we have come a long way. The markets have come into quite a bit more balance since then. If we'd look at the national average today, by the way, for those who don't remember, 345 today. Let's look at where we've been here the last 2 years. So
I love that picture.
So it was 503 a gallon back in 2022. so many records, but you'll remember then. Look at that. By August, they had dipped below $4. So that's a pretty big.
That's a huge jump.
Dollar decline in 5 weeks.
Yeah, that's a large jump.
And then look how low we got then later that year as well. By the end of the year, we were almost $2 a gallon lower. Not going to go $2 a gallon lower by the end of this year, but we could even more importantly get below that $3 mark. And I think that's speaking of this is the article that mentions that. The interesting thing here, keep in mind this: a lot of Americans have this really I don't know, politicized relationship with the word inflation. Inflation happens. That's the Fed goal is 2% inflation. There was inflation under Trump. There's more inflation over the last 4 years. And a lot of that inflation came because of consumer imbalances. People went from not driving during COVID to driving everywhere. People went from not consuming during COVID because a lot of layoffs happened to consuming a ton of stuff. Right, the government was printing checks, both under President Trump and President Biden. Wow, a lot of stimulus money, right, to keep the economy going. And then when you have Americans that have a lot of money and suddenly the economy's reopened, people were spending it left and right. But at the end of the day, Matt, the interesting thing lies right here. Adjusting for the fact that Americans are making more money, it's taking about the same amount of work, of labor, to buy a gallon of gasoline. That's inflation. Inflation also tracks wages. And looking and factoring all that in, if you adjust for inflation, both wages and what you buy at the grocery store and everything, the price of gasoline in June of 2019 is $3.34, and in June of 2018 was $3.61, compared to the current national average about $3.46. So that's why nostalgia is a powerful drug. Everyone wants prices to go back to the,
we're not going back there. We're not going back there on our. I mean,
Well, we could go back to $2.99 later this year, and keep in mind that it's going to take even less because you're making more. $2.99 today is arguably lower than $2.99 5 or 6 years ago because your wages. Okay, first of all, if your wage has not gone up in 6 years, you probably aren't doing something right. You should probably figure that out. Having said that, the bulk majority of Americans, especially those with lower incomes, where gasoline is much more of their household income, it's a bigger boon for them. And a lot of
Yeah.
the lower wage workers are making much more.
Well, and what I'm saying, Patrick, when I say we're not going to go back there, I'm taking inflationary measures across the board, food, all of that. Right. It's
Well, and
oh,
deflation is really bad. By the
that's
way,
what I'm trying to get at, which
there's a
is
recession and there's a depression. A depression is really the only tool that you can reset, right?
right.
But a depression also means a huge
You don't.
economic hit.
Yeah, you really don't want that. So
It's when people don't buy goods because they think they're going to drop. So you can,
Yeah.
it feeds. I mean, look at Japan, right? Japan's economy hadn't grown. The Nikkei index between the late 90s and 2020, it took 30 years for the Nikkei index to finally get back up to that.
Right.
Because there was just this era in Japan of not spending because you're expecting things to cheapen in price. It's a very slippery slope. You want the lower prices,
Right.
but you're stuck in stagnation. Your economy doesn't grow. So we got to be careful what we wish for. Having said that,
Right.
gas prices are in much more of a healthy era today, although arguably it is higher, Matt. I'd rather see the sign say $2.99 than $3.44. But when you look at what you spend in terms of your income, you're spending basically the same of your income, 1.5% to 2% on gasoline. That's very comparable to what it was during the previous administration in 2018 and 19.
And yet, when we look at other areas of the economy, food, for example, because no one survives without it, those prices just keep going through the roof. Taking for prime example, I'm not going to mention which it is, but I have a quote unquote club membership, right, for the larger items and whatnot. I mean, there are multiple ones you can choose.
Pizza and hot dogs?
No, not for the pizza and hot dogs.
Well, that's what I have it for.
So take for example. Just earlier this week, I was in one of those clubs last month because I may or may not go through an awful lot of coffee. And I bought a 3-pound thing of coffee and it was $10.98. This month, I can now only purchase a half-pound lighter, 8 ounces lighter, 2.5 pounds of coffee. And it's $14.98. So think about that. I lost a half a pound of the actual food product, and now I'm paying almost $4.
I'd love to jump in here too. And
think about that. But I mean, that's one food item against all.
Think about that though, and that is coffee is a commodity.
Yup.
And the thing about it is, if there's suddenly a drought or an impact to coffee beans, Matt, a lot of folks are going to be like, oh, look at President Biden drove the price of coffee up, but it's economics, right? There can be shocks. So I'm going to share this. And this, for those that don't track other commodities, this is fascinating. This graph here, look at the price of cocoa. It's at, 50 years, Matt, look at this chart, 50 years. This is what's going to be next. And arguably President Biden's going to be blamed for cocoa prices shooting up to all-time highs. There have been record droughts in Africa where much of the cocoa is grown. And so look at this is the historical chart, Matt.
Way back into the 80s and 70s.
Look at the 1977 high.
Oh my gosh.
3,000 a ton. Now look, we've tripled that. And look, it's still up there because drought, fungus has severely diminished. And look at this. All of this has really happened since,
within the past 12 months.
But yeah, look at it, year to date, last 6 months there. It started in December. It's tripled. Now it's come down a bit. But again, this highlights the White House does not have control over the cocoa crop in Africa.
Right. No matter who's in the White House.
They will get a lot of the blame for it. The same for oil. Right. The president really, now, arguably, people are going to say, well, OPEC is somewhat political. If you're friends with OPEC, at the end of the day, OPEC countries like Saudi Arabia, they're going to listen to the United States, but they're still going to do what's best for Saudi Arabia. Right. They're not beholden to U.S. politicians. They're not going to shoot themselves in the foot, help the U.S. out, and then put into peril
Right.
millions of citizens in Saudi Arabia, right?
They're
They're
gonna
at the
they're
end of
gonna
the
say
day, they're
what's in
gonna
it for them, right? Like
at the
anybody
end of
else
the
is gonna. Yeah.
day, oil producing countries are going to do what's best for them, just like the US is probably going to do what's best for us, right? That's why President Trump has moved into protectionism when it comes to trade, right? He wants to apply tariffs on everything outside to protect our economy. But the whole point here, again, is that commodities can fluctuate and it's out of the White House's control. This whole cocoa situation where prices are at record highs is something you're soon to feel, by the way, in addition to coffee, cocoa prices. So
Well,
just be ready for that. But again, highlighting the fact that when it comes to
um,
oil prices, gas prices have really normalized. But this here is going to be the next thing that you'll probably hear about.
I won't feel it because I am allergic to cocoa, so that doesn't work for me. But
I feel really bad for you.
yeah, and I didn't used to be allergic
Well,
to cocoa.
maybe you shouldn't feel bad. Maybe you're saving a lot of money.
Well, yeah, I used to be able to consume cocoa until about 10 to 12 years ago, and now I have a food allergy to it. It's I couldn't have possibly been Brussels sprouts or asparagus. It had to be cocoa.
Oh,
And
too
it's
bad you're not allergic to all the expensive food, like really good steak.
exactly. Well, no, I like my steak sometimes, but no, but yes, that's the key is the commodity pricing, but as a whole, food prices, no matter if it's in a can, the perishable area, fresh fruits and vegetables, drought or no drought, toilet paper, all of it. We're obviously paying more than we were 3 and 4 and 5 years ago. The
Yep.
only way to get the prices back down to where they were 3, 4, or 5 years ago is exactly what Patrick is talking about, which is a recession, a great recession, which is not a great recession,
It
but
has to be painful, unfortunately. That's the only
that's
way
the
to
point.
reset, right? And
That's
that's why the Federal Reserve is raising interest rates, is because
right.
it's intentional. And so many folks make that political too. Do we not realize Jerome Powell was somebody that Trump, right, voted
Yes.
and
Appointed.
installed? Yeah, there you go. Appointed.
And then was
Jerome
confirmed by
Powell.
the Senate. Yes.
The thing is the Fed has to do this. They have to make borrowing more expensive because they have to slow down the economy. When
Yep.
the economy is overheated, the only way to get people to slow down is making borrowing more expensive, a bit prohibitive to reset the economy. The good news, it's working. Demand is down for gasoline. I think part of that, though, has to do with people are traveling overseas this summer, maybe not
Hmm.
road tripping. But part of the reason, right, that raising interest rates is good is because it slows things down. And look, it's slowing things down. Gas prices are below last year. Matt, the good news, Americans spending about $500 million a week less on gasoline as a result
Okay.
of this.
So you bring up something that you and I have talked about on this program before where it comes to the economy. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, just last week or the week before, I pulled out the news stories and the headlines because they're all over the place. Soft landing, we're coming in for a hard landing, not landing at all. We're just going to circle around. You are an analyst, you are a petroleum analyst, but obviously fuel prices impact virtually everything on a store shelf that you can find,
Yeah.
plus our own personal pocketbooks when we're driving to work or whatever. It impacts everything. It's one of those foundational things that impacts prices everywhere.
Yeah.
In your opinion, sir, are we looking at a soft landing, a hard landing? We're still circling. The plane is still circling around trying to figure out what to do. Where are we headed? You know, just off the crude oil pricing, where does it look like we are headed for in the coming months?
Well, Matt, mentioning talking about groceries, a lot of the groceries, look here at the chart in the last 2 years. This is the price of diesel. It's now at its lowest point since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So if we expand to 5 years, if you look at the shock waves here, look, we're right there about 283. We're a little lower, I think, today. We're at 375. Diesel has not been this low, Matt, since early February of 2022. So we're starting to my feel is like a soft landing, but I wonder if we're going to have to push into a little bit more of a slowdown. I wonder if we could tip into a little bit of a recession here, just because now I think the markets are getting ahead of themselves, right? The Fed was supposed to. I think the expectation the start of the year was the Fed was going to cut rates 5 times. Now it's looking like they'll probably cut one or
One.
two.
Well, I'm seeing stories
They
talking
may
about
cut
one.
later this summer and then again in the fall. We'll have to see. But yeah, so The thing is that could be doing a little bit more correction. I think the Fed would probably be right to err on that side, though. We don't want to, rip the Band-Aid off too soon. But to that point, Matt, I think that there's a lot more credibility behind potentially pulling off this soft landing, because look at the price of diesel here.
And I got
83, and now we're down to 375. In fact, Matt, there's a lot more communities today, Chicago being one of them. Diesel is cheaper than gasoline. So we're getting close. And if we look at regular gas prices, we're not as low, but there you go. But gasoline's a little bit more seasonal. So gas prices higher in the summer, lower in the fall. But the good news is, Matt, we are getting closer to a balanced and normal market that is far more healthy.
Which nobody saw a soft landing when all of this started. It virtually nobody saw.
I think I had mentioned it. Like it's going to be really. It seemed more easy to pull off, but I think the Fed so far is nailing it.
Everybody was like, no, there's no way we can do a soft landing after this. It's going to have to be a hard recession, blah, 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 to reset prices and everything. Most analysts were saying it's like threading a needle.
Yeah.
Good luck
very
trying to pull it off.
To pull off.
And it is very difficult to pull off. And fingers crossed, holding our breath for the moment, it seems as if they are pulling it off.
Knock on wood.
Right. Yeah. Knock on a lot of wood. All right. So we are basically almost out of time. Very quickly, where do you see prices for gas and diesel and whatnot heading for the next week as we're calling it a day?
I think we'll inch down, Matt. I think this trajectory, we're probably going to hold or drop slightly from here. There has been a little bit of a bounce in the price of oil. Oil trading flat today at about $78.50 a barrel. It's come up from 73, but all in all, Matt, this is the low side of what we had expected back at the start of the year. I'll take it. I think we're kind of going to remain in this like slightly lower than 350 a gallon area. Keep in mind, hurricane season still upon us, the peak of which is a little bit of ways away. The good news, Matt, is that weaker than expected gasoline demand may soften the blow of a potential hurricane if we do see one in the Gulf of Mexico. So over the next week, as we get closer to July 4, at or hopefully below this national average of 345, still about 6 states, I think, that are below the $3 a gallon mark. And that's the good news, is going into July 4. Where do we stand right now? 5 states still under $3. Kansas, probably going to be the next state over. Tennessee was below $3, but they saw a little bit of a price increase here in the last couple of days.
Yeah, I even noticed prices here. I sent you a picture of $2.92 or $3 a gallon that I paid the other day. That same exact station now is at $3.07 or $3.09.
We're going to see some of those lower prices bounce around a bit, but overall, Matt, some of those low price areas like Kentucky, Tennessee, down in the deep Gulf, they're going to continue dancing. Some days they'll be below $3. Some days they may be above it. The good news also, California now is below a year ago. Prices in some areas of California are down 50 cents a gallon in the last month. There are no states now with gas prices over $5 a gallon. So,
well, let's hope the dance is a smooth waltz.
That's right.
Couldn't help it. Sorry. I had to get a bad joke in at some point in time.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, for all of us, Matt mentioned before, follow us, Twitter, X, Over a Barrel Show. Also on Facebook, Over a Barrel Show. You can shoot us an email, podcast@gasbuddy.com. That's where we'll always find us. And of course, I'm Gas Buddy Guy, and you're Over a Barrel, Matt. You can always reach us there too.
Have a good one. We'll talk again soon.